Next up, we have Movie Spotlight, our weekly segment where our film critics give their thoughts and recommendations on what to watch among the new releases in Korea this week. And with us, we have first Jason Bechervaise. Jason, hello, it's good to see you.
Yeah, it's great to be back here on a warm day.
Yes, spring is here.
Mild day.
Seems,
it feels warm compared to some of the cold weather we've had anyway.
Definitely, yes. And we have Marc Raymond with us in the studio as well. Marc, hello to you too.
Yeah, nice to see you again.
Okay, so we have one international and one local release to look at this week. And Marc, I understand that we start with your recommendation, a French film that won the Palme d'Or at Cannes in 2023. And it's also nominated for multiple Academy Awards as well, including Best Picture, Director, Screenplay and Lead Actress. It's called Anatomy of a Fall. It has the translated title of Churage Hebu in Korean. Marc, can you tell us more about it?
Yeah, this is the fourth film from the writer-director Justine Triet, but really kind of the first of her films to really get a lot of attention, especially outside of France. It stars the great Sandra Huller as a German writer who lives with her French husband and their young son in a remote mountain area of France. And then one day, the husband is discovered dead on the ground outside of their home, the result of a fall from the top floor. And then the question becomes, was it an accident? Was it a suicide? Or was he pushed specifically by his wife? And so she ends up being put on trial for his murder, which then becomes almost like a trial about their lives and their marriage, essentially. And she's also defended by an old friend, possibly former lover. Their relationship's a little bit ambiguous. And also, this is all complicated by the fact that their young son had suffered a eye injury years earlier and is basically legally blind. So, and he's really one of the only even quasi-witnesses to the event. So it's kind of partly a mystery thriller, partly kind of a courtroom kind of drama as well.
Okay, so that's the setup. I understand you are a fan of this film.
Yes.
What do you recommend about it, and why do you think it's been able to break through so internationally and secure all these Oscar nominations and critical acclaim as well? Because from the plot synopsis, it sounds like a standard, perhaps, thriller with courtroom drama mixed in. What makes it stand out?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I mean, the film it reminded me of was Parasite, interestingly enough, not in terms of its theme or its story, but in the fact that it's this movie that is both kind of a pretty mainstream genre kind of thriller that can appeal to a wide audience, despite the fact that it is a foreign language film, even though this one has the advantage of being, there's a lot of English, because that's kind of the language that they both can speak in terms of, because she's German, everyone else is French. So even though a lot of the trial is in French, there is still quite a bit of English in terms of the conversations. But basically it's a film that, again, it's been able to get all these Oscar nominations, but also it wins at Cannes, as he mentioned. So it definitely has those kind of high art kind of credentials to it. And I think a lot of it revolves around the kind of ambiguity in the film and in the story. I mean, it has all the other qualities. It's got great acting. The lead actress, particularly Sandra Huller, is nominated, deservedly so, for Best Actress. But it also has this kind of mystery at the core of it in terms of what happened. And the way in which this film ends up playing that out, I won't spoil the ending, but there is, of course, there is a resolution. But even that resolution is something that I think audiences can kind of argue with and kind of talk about. And I think it's generated that kind of buzz that's allowed it to kind of break through. I know it's done very well in the UK, for example, already. It's doing fairly well in the United States, despite the fact that, again, it is also in some ways this kind of higher brow film. It's quite long, right? It goes into really deep detail in terms of describing the courtroom case as well as the kind of emotional lives of this kind of family. So yeah, it's one of those movies that's been able to kind of get into the middle of this. It's both respected as this kind of high art film, but also has crossed over quite kind of successfully with more mainstream kind of audiences. And I think that's partly because of it has these kind of thriller kind of genre elements that it works kind of quite well with.
Interesting. Jason, did you catch this film? What did you think of it? Do you think it deserves all the praise that's been getting?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's I mean, I completely agree with Mark. I mean, it's it's part kind of procedural thriller. It's kind of part courtroom drama. It's also kind of like, it's almost like a domestic drama in a sense. And we kind of, it's a mystery, right? And so we want to know, what happened to the husband. And it's told from almost kind of different perspectives as well. And so she's essentially, she's on trial, and you almost feel like you're part of the jury, like, listening to the evidence, the witness testimonies and various other things. And it's just really intriguing throughout. I mean, the performances are fantastic. It's a whole bunch of genres into one. Mark rightly mentioned Parasite, and that's definitely a big part of its appeal. It's definitely not slow. It's 2.5 hours, but the pacing is superb. It's just truly engrossing, and I certainly didn't want to turn it off. The courtroom scenes are really well done. And there's one of the scenes later on in the film where we learn a little bit more about the husband is just fantastic, because he's an absent figure for much of the film, and then there is the scene, and it's beautifully executed. So it's a great film.
Interesting. Mark, is it cinematic? Because from the sounds of it, it sounds like it could have been a great TV drama series as well. But as we know, it's a film, and it's won these amazing awards like the Cannes. It has to be on some level cinematic as well, right?
Yeah, it's like there is a lot of the courtroom stuff in the movie, and of course it's hard to make that particularly cinematic. Even though this film, I think it has the advantage of the fact that even though it's a courtroom drama, it's a French courtroom. And they're very strange.
Yeah, they're like kind of relaxed, like they're cracking jokes, and you got their hands in their pockets, and almost kind of like, there's the formalities of it, and then they also seem remarkably casual.
Yeah, it's like, it's got a lot of the humor of the film comes out of how I think a lot of, especially for an outsider audience, not a French audience, how strange the courtroom scenes are, since we're so used to the American versions, or even the locally and the Korean versions. There's nothing really like this kind of French courtroom scene, so that adds a dynamic to it. But as you mentioned, is also, we have the fall, and we have the multiple perspectives, and that leads itself to a kind of these cinematic kind of tellings, right? That Triet and her kind of screenplay for the film really kind of worked in a lot of how she was going to film it, how it was going to, what perspectives, even what music she was going to use, and how that would enter into the plot, which it does at certain times. So all of those elements I think are quite strong as well.
Yeah, and also you got the boy, clearly who's been traumatized, not just from the death of his father, but also from the earlier accidents. So I quite like his character, and he's certainly well played.
Okay, so that was Anatomy of a Fall, out now in cinemas here in Korea. Jason, let's turn to your recommendation today. Yes, I understand that it's less of a recommendation and perhaps more of a best of the rest this week.
Yeah, someone has to do the heavy lifting for the show.
Right, so it's a comedy called Dog Days. It has the same alliterated title in Korean, and among a long list of stars is the Oscar winner Yoon Yuh-jung. But I sense this film it's not your cup of tea then.
No, and it's everything. Actually, it was worse than I thought. It's just really bland. But anyway, I'll just introduce the film to you. It's one of the major, again in inverted commas, local releases. It's a little bit expensive, I think, purely because of the star, power wattage involved in the movie. But in terms of its production values, no. It's a feature work from Kim Deok-min, who worked as an assistant director on Hero, Keys to the Heart. These are films produced by the hitmaker company JK Films, responsible for films such as Ode to My Father, Confidential Assignment, and many others. It's inspired by the 2021 novel of the same name by Ericka Waller. But I noticed there was also a 2018 American film that I haven't seen it, but of the same name, starring Vanessa Hudgens. It sounds incredibly similar. And so the Korean adaptation is basically an anthology of sorts, focusing on different characters. Familiar names, of course, from the world of Korean cinema and theatre. So Jung Sung-hwa, Kim Yun-jin, Yoon Yuh-jung, Daniel Henney, and countless others. And so we basically have this kind of Love Actually style. Love Actually is a movie that Koreans love, and it's really it holds the record for the amount of re-releases. Why do I know that? I don't know, but I do. And so we have a disgruntled man who's played by Yoon Yuh-jung, who's seeking to he's involved in this project to try and get a luxury resort project off the ground. And we have an architect, we've got a married couple who adopt a young girl, a musician, and all these kind of plot threads kind of basically interact, and we see them kind of in this scene at the end where they all come together. And so that's it really. I mean, it's an odd film to be released this time of year because it has kind of Christmas vibes.
Right.
So I'm assuming that they were planning for a Christmas release, but it didn't work out that way. Flopped at the box office. It needed 2 million admissions to break even, but and so far it's around 300,000 admissions. So now that's significant because it's produced by JK Films, and it's such a successful production company that their films invariably would strike a chord with audiences. That's not happening anymore.
Right. So, as you said, it's not a great film. It's not done well in the box office. But I know you wanted to talk about this film because of the context it provides for the theatrical market at the moment in relation to this film, right?
Yeah, so this is a film that I think would have done pretty well maybe a few years ago. I mean, the audience scores, netizen scores are actually pretty good. People are enjoying the film, but it's just not remotely cinematic. So what's happening now is that audiences are just being very selective with the kind of films that they're watching in the cinema. So I actually watched Wonka today with my son and his friends, and that was almost a full screen mid-afternoon. Now, the kids are off at school, but word of mouth is really strong. It's actually a really good film. I'd highly recommend that. We haven't talked about it on the show, but it's from the same director as Paddington, and it's just it's wonderfully whimsical, and it's just a lot of fun. And Hugh Grant is just terrific, and as is the rest of the cast. And so that's what people are watching. It is cinematic. The visuals are absolutely fantastic. Actually, the director of cinematography is Chung Jung-hoon, a Korean DP who's worked with Park Chang-wook. And so that's the movie that people are paying to go and see. Whereas this is a movie you can wait for, for it to drop on the streaming platform and then watch, as a family, at home. And the exhibitors kind of shot themselves in the foot because they increased the cinema ticket prices, and so people are being more selective. And
during the COVID pandemic.
During the COVID pandemic, the price has pretty much doubled since I got here, over a span of 13 years. And so people, they wait 3 or 4 months, and it's on one of the streaming platforms. And so I think this kind of film is not working anymore.
Right.
And what we're seeing working with audiences are films that people want to see on the big screen, or films that generate a lot of chatter. Water cooler movies,
Sure.
Such as 12 the Day, but we're not seeing these kind of film. Very commercial, very kind of audience friendly. They're just not working anymore.
Interesting. Mark, I understand that you haven't seen the film, and I'm guessing Jason's review will not have convinced you to
I
go
see you running to the cinema, Mark.
Whether in the cinema or on streaming at home. Yeah.
If this wasn't Jason's cup of tea, I can't imagine it would be mine. So I think I will take his advice on this one.
I think that's quite a scathing review of Jason as well, isn't that? Perhaps not highbrow enough for Mark.
I think he's effectively saying that. Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it.
I think we should end it before we get into a fight. Anyway, that was Dog Days, and that's it for our movie spotlight this week. Mark, Jason, thank you for your recommendations, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, take care.
Thank you.